What's up, guys? I'm Chad Barnes, and welcome to the channel. Here, it's all about real car talk, from simple fixes to smart driving tips and keeping your ride in top shape. If that sounds good to you, go ahead and give the video a thumbs up. Hit that subscribe button and make sure you watch all the way through. There's a lot of good stuff coming. Let's get to it.
The history of the appearance of the model Tagaz Tager today is known mainly to those who were interested in it. Not everyone will remember that in 2006, Taganrog automobile plant decided to expand the range of assembled cars, and not at the expense of partners, but by buying out the tooling from the Koreans for the production of the Korando model being removed from the assembly line. SsangYong agreed, and 2 years after the retirement of the second-generation Korando, produced from 1996 to 2006, the first generation of its twin under the name of Tager appeared in Russia. Its life was not too short. The car lasted in production from 2008 to 2014. However, sales and production volumes were lower than expected, so the project can be considered only conditionally successful. And how successful can be the search for such a car today on the secondary market? One cannot hope for perfect safety of the SUV body. Even the Korean original was not a model of corrosion resistance, and given the age of 15 to 25 years, there is nothing to be surprised about. Localization in Taganrog has added to it its own quality of metal, painting, and assembly, so local cars aged 7 to 13 years have quite similar problems. The lower contour of the car suffers especially noticeably. Thresholds actively rust and rot, and standard footrests additionally collect dirt and water and can hide the scale of the problem. 4 years, until they rot themselves or are removed for inspection. The edges of the arches corrode under plastic overlays. In the best case you can find rusty fender corners under them, in the worst case, fringe left from the body metal. In the cavities of the arches, especially the rear, hides rust, and often also through. On Korando, due to age, there is a higher probability that there will be holes in the arches and on the bottom to the cabin. Front wings, under which also accumulate moisture, rot from the inside, so it is worth at least to look into the joint of the front pillar of the body and the wing. On the doors, rust will almost certainly be under the plastic molding, and the black frames of the side windows sometimes peel off. In the front, in addition to fenders, rust can be traditionally found on the hood and windshield frame. At the rear, the trunk door is at risk. It itself sags because of a heavy spare wheel, and corrosion inevitably crawls out from under the fastening of the spare wheel bracket, and from under the handle of door opening. And also behind the taillights there are extensive niches, in which dirt and rust accumulate, especially in the absence or damage to the rubber plug at the bottom. One line should be mentioned: the frame, because Korando and Tager are frame SUVs. The frame itself, of course, suffers from corrosion, especially in the rear, so it is worth checking it for through damage, and for the integrity of the number for successful registration. Well, and here it is also necessary to examine the body mounting pads. There are a lot of them, and they are destroyed with time together with fasteners, provoking knocks. Another issue relevant for the owner of both Korean and Russian versions of the SUV is body parts and exterior trim. Korando is not the most popular SUV, so there is practically no choice of non-original components, and original ones are not only expensive, but also very rare. If you can buy a windshield of domestic production for 5 to 6,000 instead of the original Korean one for 15 to 16, the situation with many body parts is much more complicated. For example, a rotted front fender will make you spend 20, or even 30,000 rubles with a month and a half waiting. A bumper will also cost 30,000, if you manage to find it, and the hood or plastic moldings that girdle the entire car around the perimeter, you cannot get at all. And where to find rear doors for the 5-door Tager body, which was not in the Korean range, is a mystery. The running gear of the Aphrodis is quite simple. In the front it is an independent double wishbone suspension with torsions as elastic elements, and in the rear, an uncut axle on springs. And moving to Russia has not changed the manufacturer of the rear axle. It remained Korean, from Tungil. Suspensions as a whole are very reliable and cheap in maintenance, though some difficulties can be thrown. First of all, it again concerns the scarcity of the range of non-original components. However, what can be found is inexpensive, and even in the original version. For example, the rear lever can be bought for 3,000, as well as a spring and a shock absorber. Silent blocks are available in a wide assortment, so that the restorative repair is realistic. Ball bearings in front are changed separately from the levers and are available for 700, 100 rubles for non-original. But even here there can be small surprises. For example, the front upper lever in an assembly can be found, but the lower one, it is difficult. In general, rotted levers here can be a reason for a good bargaining. In addition, when buying it is worth asking the owner in detail about the volume of improvements of the suspension. Simplicity of the design and a scarce choice of non-original push many people to experiments and tuning, especially in the province, where spare parts are not so accessible. The result can be a hodgepodge of everything that, in the opinion of the owner, can improve performance. Springs are put from anything, from UAZ and Gazelle to Gelandwagen and W140. Shock absorbers are selected by length, and even silent. Blocks can be adjusted by size and stiffness. With brakes here everything is also simple. In front, of course, they are ventilated disc brakes, and behind you can find not only discs, but also drums. Prices for consumables are very gentle. Non-original discs can be bought literally from 1,000 rubles, as well as a set of pads. Caliper repair kits cost the same money, and in the original version. In general, if brake lines have not rotted, and calipers have not yet sourced intentionally, there is nothing unsolvable here. The same can be said about power steering. The simplicity of the design promises a minimum of problems, and in case of breakage the original Mando rack can be bought for 17 to 20,000. The pump is available non-original for 5 to 7,000. In general, checking the condition of oil, the integrity of hoses and quietness of the pump are mandatory as always, but you cannot be afraid to get burned. All-wheel drive on the Tager is made on a part-time scheme, with a permanent drive to the rear axle and a rigidly connected front axle. Accordingly, improper operation like fast driving on asphalt on all-wheel drive can condemn the transfer case, so it is necessary not only to test it, but also to listen to it, and check for oil cleanliness. Weak places in all-wheel drive scheme are vacuum clutches of front wheels connection and electric drive of downshift switching. Vacuum drive often bothers owners so much that they change front hubs for mechanical, with manual inclusion. Well, and taking into account the same love to tuning, it is worth to find out before purchase what else the years and owners have brought to the design of the all-wheel drive. Sometimes it comes to serious modifications like transition to permanent all-wheel drive with installation of transfer case and rear cardan from SsangYong Muso. Good they are actually without modifications. Both Korando and Tager had a choice of gearboxes. The basic was a 5-speed manual transmission, and for an additional fee you could get a 4-speed automatic, either 722.3 from Mercedes-Benz, or M74 from the Australian company BTR, which later under the name DSI was bought by Geely Holding. The last box was available for Tager. Of course, the automatic transmission 722.3, assembled under the license of Mercedes-Benz, is more reliable and resourceful, and the simplicity of the design, which has no control electronics, is in its favor. Such units with regular oil changes and intermediate maintenance can go up to 500,000 kilometers. However, taking into account the age of Korando and complete ignorance of the history of service of the box, the main plus today should be considered repairability and relative cheapness of restoration. However, the unit from BTR showed itself quite well, so it can be considered a good choice when buying Tager, especially against the background of chronic and almost incurable problems with the manual transmission, which did not exist in the original Korando, but appeared in the successor. The main problems were with synchronizers, and almost all gears, and the reassembly, which had to be mastered by the factory to fulfill warranty obligations, usually did not help. Crunching, cracking, and sometimes complete inability to shift gears led the owners to despair, and the inability of the manufacturer to solve the problem aggravated the situation. The main way out in this situation was to replace the gearbox either with an automatic, the same BTR M74, or with the original mechanics from Korando. Buying a Tager with a manual transmission today, it is worth paying maximum attention to the owner's stories and checking the work of the transmission. Both Korando and Tager had quite a lot of motors, and most of them are units assembled under license from Mercedes-Benz. Gasoline variants are 4-cylinder 2.3-litre M111 and inline-6 M104, which in full composition passed from the Korean to the Russian. Diesels are 4-cylinder OM661, in maiden name OM601, 2.3 litres and 2.9-litre 5-cylinder OM662, the same OM602 in Mercedes. On the Tager they were joined by a 4-cylinder diesel DA26, which Tagaz produced itself and put in everything that can be, including the light truck master. Let's briefly go through all the engines to understand what to prefer. Gasoline engines M111 and M104 are almost a win-win option, especially if you manage to find a live 6-cylinder version. After all, the M104 is the same engine that was used in the W124 and W140. Both motors have a cast-iron block, reliable chain timing and simple construction. If you follow the cleanliness of the intake, crankcase ventilation system and cooling system, especially important for the 6. Even a 4-cylinder engine is able to pass more than 500,000 kilometers before overhaul. Of course, now it is too late to believe in miracles, especially when buying Korando, but there are still chances to find a motor with a good residual resource. And in extreme case it is possible to find a unit at the dismantling for moderate money. The diesel engines from Mercedes-Benz are also good. True, these are very old pre-chamber motors, tracing their history back to the early 80s of the last century, but for the undemanding driver in operation it brings mostly pluses. There are mechanical injectors, mechanical chain-driven fuel injector, but turbocharging is added, which gives traction at the lows and liveliness in general. At the same time, the supercharger has not made the motor noticeably more expensive in maintenance. A new Garrett turbine can be bought for $30,000 to $35,000, which is not much, and there are also available cartridges for repair for $7,000 to $10,000. The rest by modern standards costs pennies. Original injectors can be purchased for $4,000 to $5,000 per unit, and the mechanical fuel injector cannot be bought new, but can be repaired. But the motor DA26 of Tagaz own production is something to avoid. Even if you leave aside its poor reliability and resource, you can't find spare parts for it. The origin of the unit is covered with darkness, and repair usually turns out to be a search and collection of all the remains of these diesels from all the nearby wrecking yards to scrape a little bit of parts from each of them. It is not surprising that the case usually ends with replacement of the motor on the same OM602. It is not more expensive, and in operation it is incomparably better. And now, having briefly understood how Tager differs from Korando and what we can expect from these cars in general, let's try to make a portrait of an optimal copy. If you are not afraid of difficulties with body parts and selection of some other parts, then taking into account the commonality of motors and automatic transmission, you can look for a younger car, Taganrog assembly. A gasoline Tager with a 3.2-liter engine and automatic transmission will be quite a logical choice. It is still possible to find a well-groomed car from the first owner on sale, about like this if Autoteca confirms even mileage and absence of accidents in the history. It is one of the best options for the model. By the way, the diesel Tager is harder to find. At the time of writing, they were only 20% of the total volume of machines sold on Avito. And the gasoline copy with a 6-cylinder engine is also not the most popular option. 3/4 of gasoline cars are equipped with a 2.3-liter engine. Well, if you want an original car, and not a replica, you can save $100,000 to $150,000 and look for a not old Korando. Offers about sale are many times less than for Tager, but here diesel cars make 2/3 of the whole market volume. So a good option would be about a car like this with a 2.3-liter diesel engine and an automatic transmission. Only time will tell whether it will be more reliable than the Russian-built model. In conclusion, while both the SsangYong Korando and the Tagaz Tager present appealing options within the 500,000 ruble budget, they cater to different preferences and needs. The Korando offers a more refined driving experience and modern features, making it a strong contender for those prioritizing comfort and technology. On the other hand, the Tager stands out with its ruggedness and practicality, ideal for those who value durability and off-road capability. Ultimately, the choice between these two twins boils down to your personal priorities and lifestyle. Consider what aspects matter most to you, and make an informed decision that best suits your needs. Thank you for watching, and we hope this comparison helps you in your car buying journey.